Hi, I'm Larry and welcome to my studio. This is part 3 of Waiting for Breakfast, my acrylic painting with 3 little doves sitting on a fence. In our last part, I was showing how to do feathers on doves in a separate demo, which I have taken out and put as part of my tips and techniques. So if you need to just look and see how the birds were done, you can go to that and see how I got to this point on these 2. This one I've just kind of left underpainted. I haven't done anything else to it. But you've probably noticed something else from the first part to now, is that I've done something with the background. As an artist, you have a prerogative of changing your mind. And in acrylic, it's real easy because you just paint over things. You can make corrections. I'll show you how to do some changes that I've wanted to do on this one, and some other things here that as I was painting, I saw some things that I'm not quite happy with. So I'm gonna fix them, but I'm gonna show you how I do it. But also the background. Now the background, I thought I could leave it, but the more I looked at it, the more I didn't like it, and it was hard for me to just start painting because it just really bothered me. If something bothers you that much, try to figure out what it is and what you need to do to correct it. The biggest problem was it was a huge empty negative space. All of this space around these birds is called negative space. And while there's usually not a whole lot going on in negative space, it's very important. It's as important and sometimes even more so than the thing you're painting yourself. The background was very distracting because it was just a big empty space. So I went back to my original photograph and I put in some of the stuff that I see in the background. And I'll show you how to do that. But I was still not convinced about doing that. And so I also do pastels. You'll see the pastel videos in the YouTube link. And I wanted to see what it looked like. So I just took my pastels, which are soft chalks. They're not the oil pastels, they're the soft pastels. And you can see right in here and a few other places, I just took my chalks and just kind of basted in to see what it looked like. And it was okay. Now those chalks are not going to hurt my paint. Basically what a pastel is, or a soft pastel is just compressed pigment. So the same pigment that goes into my pastels also is the pigment that they use in mixing the acrylic paints or the watercolor paints. There may be some variations. I'm not totally familiar with all the chemical properties of things, but basically chalks are just compressed pigment. So this doesn't hurt, and even if it bothered me, I could just come up here and just wipe it off. It's not going to hurt anything. Put a little bit of water on that, and it'll come right off. So that chalk does not hurt anything. Now, if you want to do this, feel free. That depends on you. Maybe you like your background the way it is. Leave it. You do not have to do what I did. I was just unhappy. I have being able to change things is an artist's superpower. And so I came in and I changed it. I will show you how to do that. Now if you need to, again, this is just a pastel pencil that I'm just going to lightly sketch in where I'm going to put maybe some of the tree limbs and branches. Others I'll just come in and put them in with my brush. but that's all I'm going to do. And then I'll get into doing, actually I'll get into doing the fence down here, because the fence, I want to get that more or less finished before I start working on finishing up the birds. These birds are kind of in the next to finish stage. This one is going to need to have a little bit of work done. So that's kind of a tall order for this segment or this part, but I think we can do it. Remember, you can only do this one brush stroke at a time. If you're new to acrylics or just new as an artist or an intermediate, you do not have to paint as fast as I do. I'm just trying to get as much information to you so that you can take it and practice it and find out how wonderful acrylics are. It's probably one of the most forgiving mediums I've ever worked in. So let me change my focus on my camera, and I will get back to you very quickly. Thank you for watching. All right, now that I've got it reset, I've got it so that I'm just basically focused up here on the little birds in the background. And you can see what I've kind of got going on back there. This background, you don't want to let the eye go back there too much. It's just stuff. So what I'm going to try to do is just add some more of these tree branches and things, but I want them to be subtle. I don't want them to be real bright. I don't want them to have a lot of detail. I just want them to be subtle things back there. And I have all my paints out. I'll keep saying that. I have all my paints out because I don't know what I'm going to be using. So I'm going to I've picked up some burnt sienna, a little burnt umber, little ultramarine blue, just kind of making up this kind of a dark brown color, and I added just a little touch of gesso. You can use titanium white if that's what you have. And this is my number 4 flat bristle brush, and one of the things I do when I have a brush in my hand is that I tend to like roll it so that I'm using all sides of the brush. I'm going to wipe out just a little bit of the excess paint, and then I'm just going to kind of scrub this in here. Now, I got this bird a little flat, or fat, not flat. So I'm going to take this color that I have and just cut him down. I wish I could do this. But I'm just taking the brush and just coming in and shaving off a few feathers and making them a little less chunky. They were all puffed up, so that's, you know, that's the way they were, but I just got him a little bit fatter than I wanted him to be. So now I'm just going to take my brush and just kind of, this is scumbling, where you're just kind of going in every direction. I don't want any real hard lines. Can go right over this bird because I'm not done with him yet. Can pick up a little bit of orange and burnt sienna and come up here and just like right along that edge. Now that's kind of bright for right now, so I'll wipe that out and just come in and pick up some more of that color and just blend it in. This is called brush mixing, when you're blending your colors on your palette. And I like to do that. It's more of an oil painter's technique, but it's really I like it. It gets some interesting things. I just picked up some ultramarine blue and doing the same thing, just blending it in there, kind of scrubbing it in. A lot of people think, especially beginners, they get going on something and they see, well, the tree's brown, so obviously the shadows are brown. And then when they get it done, they go, God, the shadows don't look, they look weird. What's wrong with them? Well, what's wrong with them is that shadows are cool. They need to have cool colors in them. And the cool colors are usually blue and purple in there. I just picked up some more blue, throwing that in there. Coming on up. So when you're painting your shadows, be sure to add blue or a little purple, or blue and alizarin crimson. That's a little bit easier to work with. I used to use dioxazine purple, and it is on my equipment list. If you go to my blog spot and look in the sidebar, you'll see the equipment list with dioxazine purple on it. But a little bit of dioxazine purple goes a very long way. So I just picked up some blue and alizarin crimson, a little touch of white. Throw that in there too. And you know, if you use a dioxazine purple, just be sure that when you do that, you use a little tiny bit. It will ruin your day. Okay, I'm going to come over, I'm going to pick up some Hooker's green, a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to come over here and maybe a little bit more. I've mixed right down that same area, so it had a little bit of ultramarine blue. And I'm just going to come in here and scumble this. There were Palo Verde trees. Same thing though. This bird just needs a diet, so I'm just going to come up here and just cut him down a little bit. Use that color, picking up some Hooker's or some sap green. Throw that in there. I tend to use a lot of different colors. Back to the darker green. Just scumble that in there. Gonna pick up just a little bit of yellow. I'm using a dirty brush, so there's still paint on my brush. And this is just yellow, just to kind of give a little bit of like a sun's coming through the trees. Cover there. Pick up that darker green again. Come and reshape my bird here. You don't have to paint everything out. All you need to do is just paint over it. That is the wonderful thing about acrylics. Oil painters got to scrape things off or let it dry. Watercolor painters, they either have to deal with it as it is or start over again. Just kind of scumbling that in there. Gonna kind of scumble some of this dark that I have on my brush. So acrylics are really forgiving, very, very forgiving. Now I'm picking up the ultramarine blue and mixing it down in the area where I had the green and just the same area. What I'm going to do is I want to make this area down here a little bit darker, because sometimes to make something look lighter, if you make what's around it darker, the difference in value just automatically makes it lighter. Just kind of scumble that up. Now if you look at these birds, these were all the same value before I started working on them. This bird, if you squint, he's pretty close to the same. He's a little bit lighter than the background, but not much. But if you look at these two, I've been working on them, putting on some lighter colors. Now all of a sudden they're standing out from the background. So that's what I'm trying to do. He's a little bit fat up here. I'm just taking that dark green color first and just putting that in behind his head. Then I'm going to come and pick up some of that brown and blue, because there's another little tree trunk, and just come in and fix him. You know, get him to lose a little bit of weight. I wish it were so easy. Okay, so that's basically what I've done. I'll do a little bit more. I'm just taking what's on my brush and just suggesting another branch. Put a little bit of orange on there. It's dirty orange because it's on a dirty brush, but that's okay. I don't want a lot going on back here. I just want to suggest that there is tree branches and things. Now, if this gets a little bit too solid, I just come in and just kind of blur it out a little bit. You know, it's no big deal. Just keep it soft. Maybe there's something growing up in front of it. So I'm going to break here and reset the camera a little bit, and I will finish off doing what I was doing in the background, and then we're going to work a little bit on the fence next. So give me just a second. I'll be right back. Okay, I've refocused because we're going to be working down here on the fence. Now, I've done a little bit of work on the rest of the fence, and if you need to see how to do old wood, there's a techniques and tips on just doing some old fence posts, so that, you know, break things down. If you don't know how to do something, you know, it's good to just take the time to practice something, especially if you're new. If you've never done this before, it's been a long time, take the time to do a little study. You can always paint it out. You know, just paint right over it and use it again for another time when you need to practice something. Like if you're new with doing birds or fur, feather, you know, tree branches, whatever. Practice it first, and then start working on your masterpiece. So I've kind of done some things across here. I've left this area unworked. In my photograph here, and if you're interested in following along, you can go to my blog site, and there's a link that'll have this photograph and a drawing of this, what we're doing, and also in the sidebar you'll find an equipment list. And if you have any questions, there's also email. So email me. I'll take your questions and try to get back to you, or answer them when I'm painting. But anyway, right in here I've got this really pretty piece of wood that's got some dark and some of this light color. This is just the way this particular wood ages in the sun and heat and cold and everything else. It hasn't been treated, I don't think. It's just old aged wood. And I take this picture, and it's hanging right above where I'm painting, so that I can look up there and see where I'm going with this. So I'm going to start first on this one. That was that real pretty one. And I'm going to mix to a dark. Now, I've said it before, and I'll probably say it many other times. I don't keep black on my palette. I don't like to use it because it tends to be a color killer. So what I do is I mix my dark colors. I have my ultramarine blue and my burnt umber and a little bit of my hooker's green, kind of mixing them all up together. and I make this dark, rich color. Black just, but you know, if you like the way black looks, go ahead and use it. I just don't, so I prefer to mix to a dark color. Now I've mixed it. This is my number 6 flat sable brush. It comes to a nice chiseled edge, and I can use this to kind of put in some of the lines that I see, so that there are lines. I'm just going to enhance kind of what I have here, but don't make them straight lines. These are wood grains. That, like right here is a knot. Now a knot usually means that at one point in time there was a branch that came out from that, and so the tree rings grow around that knot. I'm just using kind of the end and kind of wiggling it back and forth, coming up, can kind of wiggle and kind of dry brush that, come down again. I'm kind of using the chisel edge, but I'm also using the side of this to kind of get a little bit of a dry brush look. Picking up just a little bit of water. Come down here, add some more of these lines, kind of dry brush. Now you can do as much of this or as little of this as you want to. I do want to kind of move on. I'll probably finish this up here at the top where the weather has kind of created some little jagged edges. Just using the chiseled edge and just pulling it down. Doesn't have to be straight. Come here and just kind of like lightly skim some of that color in here, knock some of that orange down just a little bit. Can leave some of it. If I want to make a little piece of it brighter, now I don't want to take too much away from my birds because they're really the focus here. But I'm mixing a little bit of orange and white, maybe a little touch of cad red light, and then just come in and maybe touch a little bit. Maybe this is a little bit higher because the wood's going to age at a different rate. You know, some of it just the way it was sawed, you know, in the kind of, I like to use my fingers, as you've probably noticed, but that's about all I'm going to do. I don't want to do a lot. This will dry a little bit darker, and that'll be fine. Now I'm going to take the mud that I have in my brush, which is everything I've been working with, and I'm going to mix in some white, a little touch of that dark color. I'm trying to make a soft gray, and I'm just going to touch the edge, and this is just going to be highlights, and I'm just using that soft edge and just lightly pulling down right there along the edge. Now it kind of looks like the sun's coming from the upper left side, so that's where most of the the highlight's going to be. Same on this side. Just going to touch, and I'm pulling just slightly, but I'm using that whole edge. Going to touch there, touch there. Now this side is a little darker, so I'll just mix that light color that I had on my brush in with some of that dark color. That'll just make it a little bit lighter. Let's see, I'll keep my hand out of the way. Because that's not in direct sun. Now I just wiped out my brush, and I can just come along and just tap and suggest the edges of some of these boards. Like right in here, there's a board. Tap. You might get a little bit where the edges are a little maybe further up because of the way it was cut or the way that it's aged. Can streak some of that in here. As things age, there'll be some high spots and some low spots. Brush some of that in there too if I want. And then if I and this isn't quite done yet, I've still got a little bit more to do, but I can take that same dark color, which is my ultramarine blue, my burnt umber, and a little bit of the hooker's green. It's just to make a dark color. And in between these boards, it's dark because there's cast shadows between them. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, streaking some of that through there. Just gives it texture. Tones down the color. Ages it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll come back and I'll work a little bit on this bird. So work at your own pace, but try to get yourself up to here before you move on to the birds. I'll be right back in just a second. Okay, I've refocused again on my birds, and I'm not going to do all of him because there's the whole clip on how to do these birds, but I do want to show you how I bring him up. And right now he looks pretty flat, whereas these other two are starting to take a bit of shape. So this time, this is a, well, it says it's a, well, let's see, no, this is not the brush I want. There it is. I've got two of them with the similar handles. This is a number 6 round brush and long handles, so it's an acrylic brush. Now if you have watercolor brushes, you can use watercolor brushes. They've got the shorter handles. Okay, this is my liner brush. It's a watercolor brush, so it's got, you know, a shorter handle, but they will work just fine in acrylics. If you're needing some brushes, don't be afraid to use your watercolor brushes. And if you rinse them out and take care of them, you can use them again in watercolor too. The only thing is you cannot, if they've been in oil paints, you don't want to use them in your watercolor. So just be sure you mark them. Now I'm going to take some white, which is my gesso, a little bit of burnt umber, a little bit of blue, a little bit of burnt sienna. I use a burnt sienna instead of the orange because it's just a little softer. Orange can be one of those colors that will just take over your world. And mixing is usually most of the work that you do. So, gesso, burnt sienna, little burnt umber, little ultramarine blue to make a warm gray. I'm kind of going for kind of a warm grayed brown. Okay, I'm wiping off the excess a little bit. And I've got looking up at my picture to see where I'm going with this. And test. Okay, there we go. Now this is not the final thing. This is just the next step. And I'm not going to go over all of this underpainting. This underpainting now becomes texture. It becomes some light shadows. You know, this underpainting is like the foundation of your house. Come over here. Now these are kind of on the sides, so you're really kind of seeing just the sides of these feathers. But look at their shape. My eyes are constantly going back and forth up to that reference material so that I know what it is I'm painting. These birds, like I said, are kind of puffed up. But this is all I'm going to be doing here is just coming in and putting in these layers of feathers. Kind of just looking back and forth, seeing what's going on. Kind of drag some of that color on the tail while I've got it here. And I can take some just straight burnt sienna too, because there is a lot of this color in these birds. Now remember that acrylics, they will dry a little bit darker. So what you see when it's wet, you'll come back and you go, what happened? That's just the nature of acrylics. Come up here, this is just burnt sienna. There's some really kind of brown feathers right in here. Warm brown, the burnt sienna. Trying to stay out of the way. Now before there was internet, there was public TV. And there were a lot of artists on TV. That's how I learned how to paint acrylics, is by watching Jerry Yarnell in the morning. And he is a very good teacher. He's still out there. His link is on my blog spot if you look down and look at Larry's links. You learn a lot from each teacher that you have. Sometimes what you're learning is what not to do, but still that's a learning. I went back to that kind of gray brown that I had. But I'm going to finish this next layer of feathers off camera, and when I come back, this bird's going to be very similar to what these other two birds are. But remember, when you're painting the feathers, that you follow where they are on the body. So that these feathers are kind of coming up and around, and these here are coming across, and because the bird itself has kind of got a little round body. So next time on part 4, I guess that's what it is, we'll be finishing up the birds, and I hope we'll be able to finish up this painting in the next part. So I hope you're enjoying this. Remember to call your friends, call your family, stay safe, and most of all, keep painting, and I hope to see you in class again real soon. Thank you for watching.